It's Jordan Mulligan from the Mulliganbrothers, and today's interview highlight is talking about leadership with our dear friend, Dr. Ivan Joseph. Today's video was sponsored by Mulliganbrothers.com, where you can now buy the LFG t-shirts and much, much more, all linked in the description, which helps support these projects. Before that, let's jump into the highlights. Whereabouts did you grow up, and how did you come over to get into the leadership stuff? Like, I'm guessing there was a big gap in between.
Yeah, well, I was born in Guyana, South America, and so spent the first 5 years there, came and emigrated to Canada with my family. I will say I was always into leadership, meaning, I stood out, I would say. I was captains of teams, but there wasn't any formal leadership process that happened. Really what happened is I matriculated through those different leadership spots. It was as an outcome of my failures that I started over. And then I got involved in a very small university that had a strong leadership program and really good role models and mentors that put me under their wing and intentionally developed me to be a leader.
So what was your childhood like? So you grew up in Guyana, okay. So
yeah.
Standard childhood or?
Well, if you know Guyana, so Guyana is the tippy top corner of South America, right beside Brazil. So in today's world, you would call it an emerging country. Back then, you would call it a third world country, meaning, there was no, it was one of those typical Commonwealth countries that was colonialized. And so a lot of the power and influence was held with the whites. And so you had the blacks and the Indians, or what we call now Southeast Asians, in differing positions. And so my area and my childhood, as best I can remember it, was not one of high affluence. And so my parents left, typical immigrant story. When I was born, they left and went away to start over and left us to be raised with our grandparents. And so the first time I can remember meeting my parents, they left literally when I was 2 months old, was when I was 5. And so we came to Canada. Now imagine coming to Canada and you don't really have a grasp of the English. In the Caribbean, you speak what's called patois, pidgin English. A combination of Dutch, French, English, Creole, Portuguese, all kind of mishmashed together. And so I stood out like a sore thumb in Canada. I remember getting in lots of fights, not because, everybody was, I will say, out to get me, but, I was different than everybody else. I grew up in a predominantly white area. And so my parents were first generation. So where everybody had a sports car waiting for them at 16 years old and fancy jeans and all this, Club Med, all-inclusive vacations, you're trying to keep up with that, but you're working behind the scenes to have your pair of jeans. You're working behind the scenes to do all these things. So I'll say my childhood was, if you were to combine it in one sentence, it was about hard work, trying to fit in, and trying to get ahead.
So then you're in Canada. How did you get into soccer straight? It was a soccer scholarship?
Yeah.
Did you get into it straight away?
No. So, one of the sports I could play, I had 2 that I was good at, soccer and track and field, all done through high school. Back then clubs were the way to go, but my parents didn't have the money for clubs. So my dad coached me in soccer, and a high school coach who was a really great role model to me, Gary Boguski and Mike Shavalovich, coached me in track and field. And so I became really good at those 2 sports. And I was the kind of guy that would get a ball on the wall and play by myself. But the school, my parents aren't, they're immigrants. They've made sacrifices. You're not going to go away to university and do sports. Are you crazy? That's a waste of your time. And so I could not go and pursue that avenue. Even though I was athlete of the year in my high school, I was winning medals. I was ranked in Canada, all these sorts of things. So I went away to a traditional university and I failed miserably. I'm talking just too much freedom, not enough discipline, not enough structure, and I just bombed. And one of the reasons I failed out is something I speak about in different talks, which was I didn't have the right role models and representation. That's somebody that took me under their wing and looked out for me. Nobody that looked like me and acted like me and said, "Hey, young man, you've got a lot of potential. Let's take care of you." Anyway, left to my own devices, when I failed out, I was so ashamed, so humiliated. I didn't want to let my parents know, "Thank you for your sacrifices, but I wasted it." And so I needed to start over. And I called up a track coach and a soccer coach that I knew that had recruited me. And I said, hey, I know it's been a year. I would like to come to your university now if you're willing to still have me. And they said, happily to have you. And so I went over to Grayson University in Iowa, small university, loved it, and became a soccer track athlete and did school.
So, and performed really well there, I'm guessing.
You know what? Everybody has a right fit. And this is an important piece for your readers to know out there. I was lost in that big school. I needed a small school where my class sizes were 16, 20, 25. Some of them were as small as 5 or 6, where I felt like I mattered and I belonged. If I wasn't in class, a professor would say, hey, where were you? If I wanted to participate in a play, I could still participate in a play. In that small school, I mattered, I belonged, meaning I made a difference. There was opportunities for me to shine, and I wasn't just a number. And because of that, I got involved in other things. And the thing that really changed my trajectory and helped start me on this career as a vice president of student affairs is I became what was known as a house president. You might call them dons or proctors, the person on the floor who looks after all the other people on the floor. And that exposed me to a whole bunch of different leadership opportunities that opened my eyes to a whole new career that I didn't even know was possible.
So when just before that, you were talking about missing that role model, like not having that person to, how important is it to one, be one of those people for other people? But I'd love to know your advice for people who can't find somebody who they feel fits the remit for them, the role model for them.
Yeah, I'll share with you this story. You heard earlier that I was athlete of the year. I played every sport, soccer, track and field, badminton, volleyball. I love sports. The only sport I never played, Jordan, was the sport called golf. Even though I worked on a golf course and could have access to free golf. The only time I really wanted to play golf was 20 years later after I had worked there in 1997 when I saw Tiger Woods win the Masters. When he won the Masters, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta try this. And I got golf clubs for my birthday, for my Christmas, for like anniversary, and I became addicted to golf. Nobody said to me, hey, you brown guy working here, raking the sand pits and mowing the grass, stay away, you're not allowed. Lots of people invited me, but for some reason, I limited myself. I said I wasn't good enough, or no, we don't play golf. And so we don't even recognize when we're in positions that if we don't see somebody that looks like us, how much we hold ourselves back. And so that's a big segue to say how important it is. And so the thing is then, okay, you got to find somebody, and you're not going to come by accident. You got to be willing to put yourself out there and risk and say, I am looking for a mentor. Would you be willing to meet with me once a month, once every 2 weeks? And the thing is that's really important is when you're looking for a role model and mentor, you have to ask, but you have to go prepared. Here's what I would like to talk about today. Here's what I'm looking for. Hey, I'm just really interested in how to become a president. Here I am, a vice president. When I was just not so long ago, I have a mentor that's a president. And when I show up, it's like, I'd really like to be a president in 5 or 7 years from now. Do you mind if I just pick your brain with different questions every time? And then I always end my mentor session is, hey, how can I help you? A mentorship experience doesn't have to be all one way. The mentee can also add value, but you have to be willing to ask. You have to be willing to be prepared. And with everything, some people are going to turn you down because they may not have enough time for you, but that's okay. Don't pick somebody with fancy status and title. Pick somebody that really has time for you and is really committed to helping people grow.
And there you go, Dr. Ivan Joseph. Go follow him on Instagram. He has lots of wisdom out there. There's more highlights coming from him, so I just want to say thank you very much to him for his time. Today's video was sponsored by Mulliganbrothers.com, where you can now buy the LFG t-shirts. The new Not a Journal has just arrived as well, ironically named. It is a journal, but just not your typical journal. It is linked down below. If you want to see more of what I get up to on my day-to-day schedule and day-to-day basis, go follow me at Jordan Mulligan Brother on Instagram. Go inspire some change, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.